It's truly a pleasure to introduce Dr. Naqvi. Nasir was a student of mine and of Dr. Lee's, and Dr. Lee and I share a lot of very good, funny stories about him. I think he started in her class in honors biology, ended up with AP biology in my class in brain, from which he decided he would become a psychiatrist. But he did tell me that he has overcome most of our little stories that we have. Nasir graduated in 1990 from NYU, where he got his bachelor's. He went on to the University of Iowa and did an MD PhD program. From there, he was a resident at Columbia University in psychiatry, had a fellowship in addiction psychiatry. He is now an assistant professor in psychiatry at Columbia. He has a private practice in Bronxville, New York. And he reminded me that he has 3 children and that he's married and that he's never been arrested.
Thanks very much, Mrs. B and Dr. Lee, for inviting me and for that wonderful introduction. And yes, I've not been arrested yet. Okay, so let's just cross our fingers. So I think I was a graduate from Canterbury in 1990, and I think kind of what Mrs. Bean was alluding to was that I didn't always start off so directed and focused here. And it was really through yours and Dr. Lee's efforts and patience and understanding and your guidance that I really kind of found my purpose. And I'll talk a little bit about that, my trajectory in my career, and the role that having an interest in neuroscience has played in my life. So back when I was a senior, it was the first year that Mrs. Bean offered and taught the, I forget what the name of it was it neurobiology or brain and behavior or something like the physiology of behavior or something very interesting sounding. And at that point, I had a bit of a checkered history here at Canterbury, and I don't think any of you have necessarily that checkered history, hopefully not, because you're all here in the Honor Society. And in fact, that was the first year that I just realized that you were mentioning that 89, 90, and I didn't even remember who was in the Honor Society at that point. But in any case, so becoming interested in neuroscience was really kind of a pivotal and organizing experience for me. This was a very unique situation. Back then, right now it seems like, well, you can study neuroscience anywhere, and many high schools are offering neuroscience, and it's relatively easy to start studying this at a young age. Back then, it was really a kind of a revolutionary idea that they would be teaching neuroscience in college, let alone high school, right? So Mrs. Bean really had a vision, I think a passion too. You were yourself very much interested in that. And so she introduced this class, and I thought, why not? Let me give this a try. Now, granted, I had to basically figure out how to get into college because, again, this checkered history had to come to some good resolution, and it involved really working hard in senior year. But again, in order to do that, I needed something to organize me and to motivate me. And Mrs. Bean and the AP biology class, but especially this neuroscience class, made me realize that this is something that I love and that I'm actually good at. I don't think I had that many experiences of that up until that time, and it was really a powerful, motivating experience for me. And it helped me to pull it together in my senior year and do well and ultimately get into college, which is an important thing. And by the way, congratulations to all of the sixth formers here on your wonderful successes and going to great schools, and it's really great to see. It's such an important process. So I, started to study neuroscience really here at Canterbury, and it's been something that, again, it seemed to fit. It seemed like I could wrap my brain around this, so to speak. And that said something to me. It seemed like a special area, something that not everybody could sort of access or sort of understand, but it seemed close to me in some way, and it really helped me to think about my future. Now, I grew up, my father was a doctor. He was one of the local physicians here in New Milford, and I always had it in my mind that I would become a physician, but I never quite understood why. I mean, part of this is that you grow up thinking about yourself in relation to your parents and modeling yourself after them, but we don't really have necessarily a full experience of why do we want to do this, right? It's very normal. As a psychiatrist, actually, we think about this a lot in terms of Oedipal conflicts and how children end up thinking about what they want to do in life. And many children end up identifying with their parents and doing the sort of things that they do, and they don't really realize why they're doing it until they kind of get there. And it's all good. There's it's not a reason to change your mind or do anything. It's good to be like your parents. That's something that I found I became more comfortable with over time, and it helped me, and it provided me strength. But again, having an understanding and my own sense of motivation in why I wanted to become a physician, I think neuroscience again was an organizing principle for me. So it helped me to pull it together, get good grades, get into NYU, and I chose that school in large measure because it had an undergraduate neuroscience program. It was one of the few schools at the time that had it, and I majored in neuroscience. I enjoyed studying it. I started my interest in research there, right? So neuroscience is a field that is really sort of focused around research and understanding the brain and behavior. And I really got interested in more what we call sort of cellular and molecular neuroscience and how memories are formed by changes in gene expression and synaptic transmission and all these very interesting things. And it was a great opportunity there. Again, as very much an organizing principle for me. There were many distractions in college, but it really did help me to sort of think about myself and my identity. And I started to actually become interested in neuroscience almost as a kind of a creative endeavor, and research especially, in a way to explore philosophical questions around what is the self, what is consciousness, and what does it mean, for example, to have a feeling, right? To have a feeling of desire or a feeling of anger and so on, and to sort of understand myself in almost a kind of a biological way. So this was something, again, this whole idea of medicine and being a physician always was there in the background, and I was pre-med. And then I took off a year. It was actually, I planned to take off just a year to do some research, as many people do, to get into medical school, to kind of give myself more experience. I went to the lab. It was kind of actually just by chance in a way. I found a place at the Rockefeller University working for a scientist named David Vicario, and he was studying songbirds, and he was studying how songbirds sing and how they remember and encode and make meaning out of the vocal communication signals like calls and songs. A very interesting area that I never thought that I would study because, hey, I want to be a doctor. What does this stuff have to do anything with doctoring? Well, it actually just made me fascinated, and it made me really fall in love with the process of research. Along the way, now I had some hurdles, as well as college went for me. Medical school is not an easy thing to get into, and I actually failed the first time to get into medical school. So it took me a year. I applied, I took the MCAT, all that stuff, but it was difficult, and so I actually didn't get in the first year. I had this job, and I think part of it was that I didn't feel like I had a sincere motivation. Again, that idea that, I'm always going to be a doctor. I always had this idea. So that year I really just dove right into the research and fell really deeply in love with it. And in that process, I found that, this doing research is actually what I want to spend my life doing. And that led me back to thinking, there are these MD, PhD programs, right, where you can go and be a physician and focus on research, get research training specifically. And that was something that really, helped me to, again, sort of organize my thinking. And it actually, by applying to MD, PhD programs, people were actually able to see the work that I had done and my interest and passion in research. And that helped me to really kind of focus in on and I got into a very good program at the University of Iowa, where I went and I continued to study neuroscience. Now, along the way, I became interested in this question of addiction, right? Addiction is a fascinating area, and in that process of becoming interested in addiction and human behavior, I realized that I wanted to go into psychiatry, right? And psychiatry, so again, my interest in psychiatry, like Mrs. Bean was alluding to, kind of started really at that, sort of idea of neuroscience and wanting to kind of carry that forward. So I guess the, being interested in psychiatry has helped me in, so neuroscience obviously plays a very important role in understanding human behavior at the biological level. So I did research where I looked at how specific parts of the brain that we think are involved in addiction, if you have brain damage in those areas, what happens to your addiction? Well, I found that, in fact, there was this one part of the brain called the insula, where if you have a stroke or some form of brain damage there, your addiction seems to actually go away, right? So it suggests that this part of the brain has some critical role to play in driving the addiction, and that was something that I became kind of known for, right? And it was something that, moved the field in a certain direction and allowed us to have a certain insight into this new brain area. So that discovery, more importantly for me in terms of my career trajectory, actually helped me to get into residency at Columbia University, where I was able to continue this passion and interest in science. So I guess, in summarizing, it's something that I would suggest to you all who are starting in college, have a passion, have a particular focus, but also be open, right? Because your career paths and your interests are going to change. Many of you are going to start off being interested in certain areas, and it's not going to be clear why, right? But if you find something that's intellectually engaging and something that excites you emotionally, college is a great place to explore that and to make mistakes, and also to fail occasionally, right? Many of you may not have had that many experiences with that yet because you're so accomplished, right? But it's inevitable that you're going to run across an experience where, hey, I don't get into medical school, or I don't, get into this particular field that I want to. And, those are important experiences to learn about yourself, but also to understand, what particular path you can end up taking. Because, in dealing with these kinds of, hurdles along the way, you can, again, when you look at my career from the outside, it can seem like, well, okay, you've always wanted to be a doctor, you've always wanted to be a neuroscientist, you had a very clear idea of it, and it's true, right? But without these kind of deviations from the plan, I don't think that I would be where I am now. But I can definitely say also, without the teaching that I got here at Canterbury, especially that Mrs. Bean and Dr. Lee have provided, I wouldn't be where I am. So I really do credit them, and I do credit the education I received here in many ways for what I've been able to accomplish. So it's really a pleasure to be here, and I do thank you for inviting me and letting me talk. Thank you.